All right, Popoki. We need to get out of the camera here. I think she's here because what I'm going to draw for you is one of her favorite members of the chordata. Vertebrata. Now you may not know this word, Actinopterygii, but you probably know about ray-finned or bony fishes. So that's what we're drawing here, is a ray-finned fish. Do a little bit of the external anatomy and a bit of the internal anatomy as well. So where to begin? How about over here at the mouth end? Gonna kind of end it a little bit short of the end of the page because I'm going to leave some room there for one of the most distinctive features and best for identifying different types of fish, which is the that's okay. The tail fin, also known as the caudal fin. Now, we saw previously a couple times, like the Ophiuroidea, the snake tail echinoderms, and the Urochordata are the chordates that have the notochord in the tail. Euro is the Greek word root that means tail. Cauda, this word root here, is the Latin word root that means tail. So we see that here, and we're also going to see that when we get into the amphibians. The amphibians that have tails are in a class called, an order called Caudata. Okay, so another thing that fish are very well known for having is on their back or their dorsum, they have a dorsal fin. Okay, so that's 2 of the 5 fins that we need to know something about. 1, 2, okay. Another fin, and I'm just going to go ahead and up here towards this end, I'm going to draw a couple more bits of the external anatomy. So fish have eyes, image-forming eyes. They have a mouth. That's pretty clear. This structure here is kind of at the back of the skull, and it forms a lid covering the gills. So we see it's got a name that means lid that we've seen before, and that name is the operculum. And then that's typically just a little bit anterior, the operculum is, to another one of the fins that we normally expect to find on a fish. This would be the pectoral fin. So what are the other fins? Well, typically there's one that's just a little bit after the midway mark, going in the anterior posterior direction. That is going to be the pelvic fin. And the last one, often it's a little bit larger. This is known as the anal fin. And that anal fin is typically just posterior to the anus. But this is the post-anal tail that we would expect to find. And because we're at the anal fin here, I'm going to put a line here. This line is not a part of the fish anatomically in life, but we're going to do the external anatomy here, and all of this in here is going to be internal anatomy. Okay, so from the operculum to this line here, this is all going to end up being the guts of the fish, or essentially the stuff that you typically clean out of a fish when you go fishing and decide you're going to eat what you catch. Okay, so continuing on with the external anatomy, I'm going to just draw a line and make it a little bit thicker than just a single line there. And this here is a very important sensory organ that runs down the entire length of the body of the fish past the skull. And this is called the lateral line. And the lateral line is a very important, like I said, it's a sensory organ. This is what fish use to kind of sense what's happening in their surroundings. So if you ever look at a school of fish and wonder why they are just constantly bumping into each other and having, wrecks and just, it's because that lateral line is so very sensitive that they know where they are relative to other fish within a school, or what direction certain compounds they might be attracted to or might be trying to avoid may be. Important chemosensory, thigmosensory, like a touch sensory type organ. And because we're on the external anatomy of the fish, these are probably larger than they would be, but they're easier to draw. You probably know what these are. I'm not going to tell you that they have a fancy name that you're not familiar with. These are scales. And I'm just going to quickly make just a series of C's to fill in this space. So we know we're looking at the outside of the fish. So these are just going to be, we'll just call them scales. And there's a lot to scale anatomy that I'm not going to talk to you about, because I'm not a fish expert. I'm just a guy drawing a fish on the internet. Okay, so we're not going to draw in the complete skeleton, but we are going to draw in some of the most important bones in the skeleton. I mean, all bones are important. You don't want to be missing any bones in particular. And I'm exaggerating, I think, the length of these things, just because I don't want to spend all day here drawing them, but just want to get the point across. That going just a little bit dorsal of the dorsal ventral axis. So not right down the middle, but a little bit dorsal, because remember, this is a vertebrate. It's going to have a dorsal tubular nerve cord, and that's what this is part of. So these are going to be your vertebrae. I'm just going to point arrow to one vertebra. And I'm going to, just inside the skull, I'm going to give this fish a fish brain. Okay, so the brain is running down this. This is the first time we're seeing a brain rather than just a collection of ganglia. And it's going to be plumbed to a spinal cord, which is running down the middle of the vertebrae. The spinal cord, that is our dorsal tubular nerve cord, which is our synapomorphy of vertebrates. And you might be wondering to yourself, well, where is the notochord? Well, the notochord in vertebrates typically, if not always, is dissected up, so that there's going to be cushions of cartilage between the vertebrae. So we have vertebra, cartilage, vertebra, cartilage, vertebra, cartilage. And those discs, as they are called, that's the notochord. That's what comes with the notochord. So the notochord and the spinal cord in vertebrates become very intimate with each other. So the spinal cord runs through the notochord and the vertebrae. Okay, so we see we've got we know here's the anal fin. The anus is eventually going to be back here. We've got a postanal tail. We've got a notochord. We've got dorsal tubular nerve cord. What about pharyngeal gill slits? Where this is, where if we just look, if you've ever been fishing and you picked up a fish by putting your finger under that operculum, you know that what lurks under that operculum are the gills. I'm running out of space here, so I'm just going to go out like this and say that those are gills. Gills are used for gas exchange in fish. And because they're right there in the throat, that's what develops from the pharyngeal gill slits. They develop into the gills in fish. Okay, let's see. What else are we going to put in the side of our fish here? Well, it's got a closed circulatory system. And that closed circulatory system means that we've got a heart, which in our fishes is a two-chambered heart, one atrium, one ventricle, and we'll draw that separately in another picture. But we've got a two-chambered heart, one atrium, one ventricle for pumping the blood through that closed circulatory system. And so this is good. This blood vessel is going to be hidden behind some other organs there. So I'm just going to put in kind of this crescent-shaped thing there. That's going to be our fish's liver. First time we're seeing a liver in an animal that we've drawn, like a fully fledged organ for doing all of those liver functions. Okay, what else do we need? We need to feed our fish, and because we need to feed our fish, we're going to give our fish a, kind of tucked in behind here, a stomach. And because we've got a stomach, we're going to poke out some guts. And we're going to have an intestine that eventually leads out to an anus. And so fish, they have an anus, but the anus empties out along with a couple of other of the fish's organ systems that we're going to have to draw in here. So next, I'm going to draw in kind of just like a sac-shaped structure, which is really kind of loby. Lots of little nooks and crannies to this structure here. Try and poke out there. That is the fish's gonad. And fish typically are dioecious, meaning there's male fish and female fish. However, they typically are one or the other, but they might change that status during the course of their life. One of the most inaccurate things about Finding Nemo, I find, is that you've got Nemo, the fish, the son, who is alone with his father, and the mother has died, and so the father is doing his best to take care of Nemo. Well, in anemone clownfishes, what actually happens is if the female of the group of fish dies, one of the males will convert into a female. So the gonad will cease producing sperm, start producing eggs, and so yeah, that does not happen in Finding Nemo. Imagine how angry people would be if they made a biologically accurate Finding Nemo. All right, I've had that thought. Let's move on. Okay, a couple more things for the internal anatomy of our fish. Oh, I should say that gonad also empties out at the same opening where the anus opens out and releases its payload of stuff that needs to get out of the fish. Cat, I'm really worried that you're going to fall off there. Okay, so another thing we need to have inside of our fish, I'm going to put this behind our stomach and it's going to kind of taper off there. This is the swim bladder. And the swim bladder has the function of helping to regulate buoyancy in the fish. So it can be filled with metabolic gases. It can be purged of gases, and that will help the fish kind of maintain a certain depth in the water column. And swim bladders, it's thought, are homologous with lungs. But, well, there's a whole complex story there that I don't want to get into about which came first, the swim bladder or the lung. And then tucked behind our swim bladder as promised, there's one more structure that's going to empty out through that opening there. I'm going to go through scales all the way up here. This is going to be the fish's kidney. So no longer do we have nephrostomes and metanephridia. We've got a full-fledged kidney full of nephrons, etc. And that's going to empty out. There's going to be a urinary bladder. And that is also going to empty out through this shared opening here where we've got the anus, the gonad emptying out, and the urinary bladder out. So one opening for 3 separate systems. And let's see, I think I've got all of my fish parts labeled in there. It's a good number of things for us to remember. But you will see an image much better drawn than what I've done here on your exam for the final. So it's good to know what these parts are, and it's really helpful, I think, if you draw them yourself. Okay.